wish I could be in the south of France, in the south of France tonight.
Bonjour, bienvenue à Hakabi. Why am I speaking French? Well, this week we have a construction project, not so much a hack. French doors. I installed French doors where there were no French doors. This is a sunroom on my girlfriend's house, and I'll be moving in soon. Yeah, that's right, we are getting serious, look out. And the dogs need a place where they can hang out, and so we decided to put French doors on here because they look wonderful. So I'm going to walk you through the entire process of what it took to put these on. It was quite a job. I'll bet I spent a good 40 hours doing this. So follow along now and we will install some French doors. This is the rough opening for the French doors. This was not built with doors in mind. For one thing, it's only 79 inches tall. Doors are about 80 inches tall, and the width on this measures 69 and a half. The doors I've chosen are 32 inches wide by 80 inches tall. So 32 times 2, 64 inches. And if we figure an 1/8 of an inch clearance here, an 1/8 of an inch clearance in the middle, an 1/8 of an inch over here, and do a bunch of math, it works out to about 2 1/4 inches that I need to build out on that edge and that edge to hang the doors on so that they will be spaced properly. So I need to make this door jamb out of some other lumber. I could have went to a mill, I suppose, and dimensioned it out and had them cut it, but I just went to the hardware store and bought some dimensional lumber, and I'm laminating that together to make this door jamb build out. So we're going to go do that right now. Okay, let's get started with building up these door jamb pieces. This is the lumber I'm going to use to make this build up. And these are pine boards, select pine boards, clear of knots. The two of these will go together and get laminated together with some wood glue and some screws, and that will make my door jamb. So to do that, I am going to put some glue along here, all the way up and down, smear it around really well. Put this on top. Then I'm going to put a piece of wood on either side and then clamp them together with my clamps to make sure that the pieces stay nice and parallel. Run some screws in and work my way up the board, and then we'll let these dry for quite a while before we work with them, and then we can put them on there for the door jambs. Okay, now that the glue is spread out, we'll put the other board on the top. Lined up. Put a bit of weight on it with my knee. Get my clamps on here. Give it a little squeeze. I know that they're nice and parallel. And they'll stay that way. And now we'll start putting screws in. Now that we have that finished, the next thing to do is to get the doors cut to size. Like I said, this measures 79 inches from the floor to this top section, and the doors are 80 inches. So to allow a little bit of clearance, about 1/4 inch top and bottom, we'll split that difference later. We need to cut the door down to 78 and a half inches. We're going to take that off the bottom of the door. Let's go back out to the shop and do that. There we go. Now we'll run a sander over this just to clean it up a little bit. chamfer the edge just a tiny bit to keep any splinters from happening, and we'll do it to the other door. There's the doors temporarily in position. They're being held in by that furring strip up there and another one on the other side. And this gives me an idea of the gap that I need to fill right here, which is about 3 inches, a little more than I figured. I did my math a little wrong there, lost 1/4 of an inch. I need to build that out about 2 3/4 inches, not 2 1/4. Well, sometimes things turn into a can of worms. I got to looking at this and realized that this was not attached the way it should be to hang doors on. And if you look in there, I think you can probably see through the big gap here. And the only thing keeping this in shape was the trim that was around the outside that I've taken off both of the verticals. So what I'm going to have to do is pull this off. And we need to kind of reframe this with a 2x4. Everything needs to be solid, wood to wood. We can't have any air gaps here and things hanging where by the time the doors are attached to this, everything's hanging on some finishing nails, and that's not going to work. So we got to rework this door a little bit and really make this able to hold a door properly. Okay, that's better. Now we've got 2x4s all around here. These are totally plumb. The ones on the top are totally level, and now we're ready to put a casing on this. Then we can put the door jamb and get something real to hang this door upon. I put the other casing I had up here. I recycled that. Nothing wrong with that. I can use it. The reason I did that was to get the height from here to the floor for the door casing that I needed to build, which I did. It's right there. There's the buildup I did earlier, laminated together. It's also screwed and glued to this. And I marked the hinge points on here already. And I did that by marking, starting out 1/8 inch from the top for some clearance at the top on the door. Then I measured down 8 inches. So I'm starting the hinges at 8 inches from the ends of the door. And I put one hinge mark here, and then I did the same thing down at the bottom, factored in 1/8 of an inch here for clearance, and measured up 8 inches, and then there's that hinge point. And then I simply divided that distance in the middle, found a center line, and then put that hinge point right there. The way I marked these hinges was with a hinge, and I just put a piece of duct tape on there, and that duct tape represents how deep into the door the hinge will mount. As you can see there, it leaves a little bit of wood behind, and that needs to be routed in place, so we need to mark all that out. Now I need to transfer that to the door. So I've got the other jamb marked out here, as you can see, and I've got the door on the floor there, laying on it, shimmed up on both sides so it's nice and level. And then what I do is I align the door 1/8 inch from the top of the jamb, and then just make tick marks right where the hinge point is, right there and there. And then once I do all that, turn the door on edge, put the hinge on there, mark out the lines, do all my routering, and the router depth will be just that thickness right there of the hinge. And once I have those routed, then I can mount them here on the rough opening, and then I can use my door shims right there to shim that out about 3/16 of an inch on each side. I put the doors in there ahead of time, as you saw before, and I knew about what my clearance needs to be. So next step is to router these out and then get them mounted up here and shimmed properly. And I'm going to do this by hand. Here we go. It looks good. I deviated a tiny bit right there, but that's not a big deal. Nothing a little filler material won't get rid of. Not bad for just by hand, freehand. It worked out pretty well. Nice and flush. Let's get these doors hanging. Alright, the router jambs are in place and flush up against the 2x4 in there. And we need to make sure that they are perfectly plumb. Very important. So let's get a level up here and take a look. See what we've got. That looks good. And then we'll use the same edge of the level over on this side and make sure they're okay. Yep, it looks good there too. Now, funny thing with this wall, I can see the drywall behind there sticks out quite a bit. So when I go to trim this out, I'm going to have to sink the trim into the drywall. That's because this wall is actually built quite crooked. Let's see how far off it is. The next step will be to put some 3-inch screws into the jambs to hold them in place. I like to use screws. Some people will just hang a door with finish nails. That's okay on a hollow core door, but on French doors that are heavy like this, I like to use a 3-inch screw right there into the 2x4. So I'll run those in first, back them off a little, and then right in here we'll put the shims that will help me get this in place so that the gap between the doors is proper. Let's do that next. I've installed the shims and tightened up the screws. You can see how the shims work. They are just 2 tapered pieces, and if you need to shim the door out, you just put those in there and you just push one this way, push one the other way, and the door will come out this way. And so you can loosen this screw a little bit, or if you're using finish nails and you have one in and driven in part way, just the tension of the nail and the wood will hold the jamb in place. And as you tap these in, you'll bring it out, and then you can check for plumb with your level, and everything looks wonderful there. So I've got both sides done, shimmed out about what I think they should be, a little bit of a gap there. And I put that stop back up there so that I can lean my doors against it. I'm going to put the doors back in there now and see how they space out. The doors are hung, and I've moved my shims a little bit here and there, adjusted them after I got the hinges all mounted and the doors mounted, and dialed them in where I've got a really nice even distance all the way down the door. And that's that. I had to cut a little bit off from the bottom of this door because it was scraping the floor a little bit right there. The floor is a little bit uneven, not such an uncommon thing. But there's the doors hung. Now we just need to tighten up the jambs at those points right there. And on these wedges, I like to put just a little bit of wood glue in there just to keep them in place before they get a final tighten down. Just squirt a little right in there and right in there. Now it's time to put the lock set in. I've got this measured 3 feet from the floor. That's pretty much a standard height to put a lock set in place. And I've got this handy jig that I've had for quite a while now that mounts right here on the end where the bolt would go in. It just holds on there with 2 screws, and you can adjust the back set right here. It will go 2 3/8 or 2 3/4. I've got it set right now for 2 3/8. So let's go ahead and drill that out. I usually drill until the hole goes all the way through, at least on the drill bit part, and then come in from the other side, and it makes for a little bit easier clearing out of that plug that's in there. See, it pulls right out of the hole saw pretty easy. Otherwise it's buried down inside the hole saw. It's a little difficult to get out. Now we'll switch hole saws and do this. There we go. Now we can remove the jig. And there we go. We have a hole here for the lock set, we have the hole here for the bolt, and we have the 2 screws to line up for the bolt to go into. Now I need to do the mortise for the bolt, so I'll put this in there and line it up to the holes. Make sure it's even left and right in the door, and trace this with a pencil. And now this needs to be either routed out or chiseled out. Since I have the router bit already in the router, I think I'll just bring it in here and router it out. Okay, that takes care of that. Now we can put the lock set in place. Just slide it through that way. And the part that goes in the inside of the house goes here. And slides on, and then a couple of screws go in there, and that's it. That's what holds it all together. There we go. Now we have to put the striker on the other door. Alright, on the other door I have a mark that's lined up on center with the bolt here. And I've put a center line mark on that. And now I need to drill that out with a 7/8 flat bottom drill bit, about 3/4 of an inch deep. Go. That should be plenty deep enough. Here's the striker plate that needs to mount on here, and it also needs to be recessed a little bit and centered on these holes. So I'll get it all lined up here and then mark around the outside. And once again, I think I'll use the router because it does a nice clean job. All right, let's see how it closes. Lovely. Now we get the other handle mounted here, which is just a dummy handle. It won't do anything. Just looks nice to have one opposite of the other, and it gives you something to open and close the door with. And then we'll put the flush bolts in on the bottom and top. That's what will keep this door solid in place and allow it to be solid so that the other one can close into it. What you're looking at here is a flush bolt. This is called a flush bolt because it will mount flush along the edge of the door, and this is the door that will stay stationary. The flush bolt goes here, recesses into here, mounts flush, and then that bolt will go into a hole in the floor or in the top door jamb, and will secure the door in place, and the other door will hide it so no one can get in and shimmy the bolt out of place. So the first thing that has to happen for that to mount is we need to mark the location that it's going. So let's get it centered on the edge of the door, and we'll keep it flush with the bottom here. Just make sure we get it lined up nice and straight, and and centered. Pretty easy to do this by eyeball. And then let's mark where that's going to go with a pencil. Nice and tight to the edge. And we have now a very clean line where we need to chisel this out for the flush bolt to go. So we'll chisel this out first to this thickness right here, which is a little more than a 1/16 of an inch. And then we can fit it upside down to make sure that we've got it nice and flush. And once that's done, then I'll use the router to router out a channel for all of this mechanical stuff to drop down into the door. Okay, let's start with the chiseling. Now keep the flat edge towards the part that you want to keep, and let the beveled edge go in towards the part you want to remove when you're first doing the perimeter. I hit it with a razor knife, but I need to get the end here a little better. That should be good enough. Let's just go ahead and start right here. Right up to the end of the cut. Off it comes, old school style. Now you can do this with a wood block too, which will give you a little bit more finesse. Not quite as much of a heavy blow as the hammer. So it takes a bit of patience, and you'll get there. If you've never chiseled before, practice on some scrap wood first. So let's keep going on this. As you get closer to the final depth, you can just do it by hand. Like so. Okay, let's see what we've got here. There we go. Nice and flush. Now we'll mark this along the bottom and get that part. Now with all of that routed out, a little bit wider through here because of this bulge. This should drop right in. Yep, there we go. One flush bolt. Now we just put the screws in, and that's about it. The flush bolt is all installed, and we're ready to hang the door back on the hinges, but I need to know the location of this hole so that I know where to drill it in relation to the outline of the door after I hang the door. So obviously it's at the halfway point this way, but I also need to get what the depth is. Here's this handy tool again, nice little depth gauge. I can put that right on the edge there and get it set right at the halfway point of that bolt and set it like that. Tighten it down. You could do this with a ruler too. It looks to me like that is 5/16, just a little bit under a ½ inch. So the center line of my bolt hole on the floor will be 5/16 from the edge of the door. Alright, let's get the door hung up. Now that the door is hung back up, I can mark where my flush bolt hole will be. So I'm going to just push the door closed till it bumps the door jamb at the top, and use the floor here as a bit of a guide and mark where the door goes. And you'll see I've got masking tape down there. That helps me out with marking the floor a lot easier. Trying to write over varnish is a bit difficult. So now we'll mark where that center line was, which was 5/16 in from the end of the door. So if I put my depth gauge there, put a mark right here, that will be the center line for the hole in this direction. Okay, that's my center line and the place where the hole gets drilled for the flush bolt. I have a 1/2 inch flat bottom bit chucked up in the drill. Put that right on the center line. Drill the hole. That should be plenty deep. Okay, if all went well, that flush bolt should push down right into that hole. Look at that. There we go. One down, one to go. There's a reinforcement plate that goes on these flush bolts, and I have 2 ways I could mount that. I can do it this way, and you'll still see a little bit of the thing revealed on either side of the door, which is not so good. It would be nice to have it hidden when the doors are closed, so let's go ahead and line that up right there. We'll put the hole centered right on that hole, and then we'll just trace that out. There we go. Nice and flush. Put the screws in and that hole is done. Okay, both flush bolts are in and anchored. That door is solid. That door can close against it. You see it pulls a little past there, so what we need to do now is put a piece of wood on here that will match the door jamb that sticks over a little bit, about like that. That'll go on this door and overlap slightly and let this door hit against it. There we go. Now we have a place for that door to strike against when it closes. Now we can go ahead and put that same type of strip around the jamb. Okay, the door jamb is all trimmed out along its perimeter, as you can see. Now we just need to get rid of all of these door shims, the jamb shims, and they're pretty easy to take care of. You just kind of go like this, and that's it. And they break right off, and they usually break off back behind the door jamb. We need to get those out of the way so that we can put the molding on around this perimeter here, which will be a little tricky because I've got such a huge gap here now. I've got 3 1/4 inch molding, so what I'm going to do is put it along here, attach it here with finish nails temporarily, mark it right here, and then cut away the drywall because some of this is not flush. There's areas where the drywall sticks out further than the door jamb. But again, that's because of the way this place was, this was added on, this room was added on to the outside, so the sheathing of the outside of the house actually creates that extra 1/2 inch. So we'll just cut that away and it'll look just fine. So that's it, there you have it. How to install French doors where there were no French doors. I hope you learned a thing or two about how to install doors in general, and if you do this yourself, plan ahead. That would be the best piece of advice I could give you. Think about where you want to put them, measure the rough opening if you already have one, and figure in your door jambs, the width of the doors, all that stuff. Think ahead, draw a plan, follow the plan. So, there you go, and until next time, keep on hacking. Hey doggies, come on in.
I could be in the south of France. In the south of France, sitting right next to you.